I read it. Gracie, what did you read? The Naughty List. Not gonna lie, the Santa lore is pretty standard for a lot of Santa-based movies I've seen. Nikolai. Nikolai's been Santa for 5 years. The previous Santa was his brother Nicholas, who retired young to go live with his wife somewhere. And the previous Santa was their dad, and the previous Santa before that, and the previous Santa before that. Nikolai's lonely. But he's got a job to do because he's Santa now. So he's delivering presents, and enter Kate. Kate's a single mom, but her kids are away on a cruise ship with her terrible, horrible ex-husband, so she's all alone on Christmas. Some of the dialogue's kind of cringy and they bond over Mamma Mia, but it had some genuinely sweet moments. 4 stars.
Alien Thanksgiving, because of course this exists.
I have to. I simply must. Why is it 270 pages? The Santa one I just read was only 45. Oh my god. So it wasn't bad. The author just very much had a thesaurus on hand while writing it. Also, the dialogue was pretty awkward and clunky throughout the whole thing, and the only one who had an excuse was the alien. His name's Carlisle, by the way. I think in spite of having to suspend your disbelief over this woman bringing an alien home for Thanksgiving, some of the conflict resolution was too easy, and I don't understand how it happened. But anyways, Kelly's a barista at college, and she has this really shitty ex-boyfriend named Sheldon. Kelly's family really wants her to get back together with Sheldon. Like, they're too invested in this. Kelly says she has a boyfriend. Kelly's a liar. So Kelly asks this hot guy Carlisle that comes to her coffee shop to fake date her for Thanksgiving, and then finds out he's an alien after she asks him, but before Thanksgiving dinner, and still brings him 3 stars.
Railed by the Easter Bunny.
It's only 50 pages. I read it. I'm very invested in this world. In this world, there are old gods who walk amongst men, and they produce heirs with humans, and their power gets watered down over time after generations of descendants. Lily has been in an abusive relationship with one of these descendants for like 5 years, and she wants out, but he rules over the valley that they live in, and so she has no options to escape, except to go to his great-great-grandmother, the goddess of spring, and so she makes a deal, which you're not really supposed to make deals with the old gods, but she does anyway because she's desperate, and the goddess of spring is like, I'll give you all the power you want if you marry my son and produce an heir, and her son is the Easter Bunny. And he's like this humanoid bunny man who is legitimately very respectful during their private time. But basically, this is book 1 in a series, and I need the series to continue because I want to know what Lily's supposed to do with all the power that she's given now that she's producing this heir and also like given a piece of the power directly from the goddess of spring. 4 out of 5 stars, but why is this only 50 pages? I am halfway through the sequel book to Railed by the Easter Bunny, and of all the things that I was sort of expecting in this book, time travel was not one of them. Also, Dahlia Davies said, no cisheads allowed. I'm living my best life right now.
Even though I'm named after him, if he figures out that I'm not something, he's gonna make it his mission to destroy me in front of him.
Have I read what? I think me having a platform is bad, actually. A lonely woman has a bakery. She made way too much gingerbread dough on accident. Her friend went home. She got bored and then she made a wish. What I will give this book props for, though, is how much I genuinely laughed out loud at the author's choice to make the gingerbread man only speak in rhyme. That's all I have to say for the review, because I just want you to have time to sit with this. I don't think people were supposed to know this many things. We know it's too much. So I was just tagged in a video asking me to read and talk about Taken by the Tetris Blocks, to which I informed this person that I have already read this book as well as all of the books in the Digital Desire series, but me being tagged means that I forgot to make a video about it. I just have a lot of mixed feelings about this author. So let's do that now. Taken by the Tetris Blocks is our introduction to the main character that is pretty consistent through the majority of the books in the Digital Desire series. Is she given much depth or complexity or like enough of a personality to really justify being a main character beyond being a vessel for her to have relations with different digital beings? No, not really. That's also not really the focus of these books. Book 1 brings us to an alternate version of reality where sentient, gigantic Tetris blocks have floated down from, like, the ether. I don't know. They're integrated into everyday life, including the workplace where our main character works at. She's just been fired. She's been dealing with workplace harassment. She meets these Tetris blocks in the bathroom. Anyways, we're going to move on to book 2. Conquered by Clippy. That same character meets Clippy. There's like a mystery plot. It's a whole thing. I don't know. The ghost of Steve Job, not Steve Jobs, Steve Job, inhabits the iWatch that belongs to this same character. Her name is Christine, by the way. Her name's Christine. Book 4 is where I think the series peaked. This is really the only installment worth reading. It's very clever. I will always give it its flowers. This is a very clever installment to the series. The book opens up on the standard copyright page that's in all of the books, that's in all books in general. And then the copyright page starts to talk to us, the reader. And the copyright page is reminiscing about a time that about a time that the copyright page had a moment with Christine. But then the copyright page starts to have feelings for us, the reader. I think it's the most creative book to ever exist ever, which then leads to Rammed by the Reviews for this book, another very meta, self-aware installment, where the author took literal reviews for the book and then gave it life within the book and, like, seems to be able to be edited and, like, added on to as more reviews keep coming. I don't know how to find Fingered by the Pale Whale. This isn't available on Kindle, but it's listed on Goodreads. And then the final book, which has nothing to do with Christine, is My Racist Robot Lover. This just felt like an excuse to say slurs without getting in trouble. I don't like it. So I read the Potato Shifter book. Yes, you heard me correctly. All he wants for Christmas is a fingerling. I hate how many people reached out to me to put this on my radar. Anyways, this was whatever. This book features 2 characters. Tala, who's an alpha wolf shifter in his pack, who's very grumpy and kind of annoying. And Frenchie, a potato shifter who is very annoying. There's breeding. The plot is overly repetitive, especially in how often Frenchie is on death's doorstep. In case you were wondering, he needs to be healed in potato form in special dirt. He can also move in his potato form and communicate with Tala telepathically. I think the biggest crime, beyond Tala literally eating Frenchie, is how little Christmas is mentioned. You can't put Christmas in the title and then have Christmas barely be relevant. So about 3 days ago, a Twitter friend of mine sent me this very beautifully illustrated drawing of a person interacting with a tree. T jokingly asked me, "Have you read this yet?" And I told T that with the direction the shifter romances were going in, I must be getting to it soon. Out of the paralyzing fear that the book did exist, I purposely did not go looking for it, which means it's all Brenna's fault when she tweeted this yesterday. So I read it. Merry Monsters is a Christmas monster romance anthology. So let's just go through all 9 of the stories in this collection. Starting off with the opening story about a woman who's pretending to be a man in order to gain passage on a ship that is then destroyed by a kraken, and then she's saved by a lady kraken. I think she was called something else, but I really don't want to go back and check. Is it well written? Yes. Is it sapphic? Yes. Does it have anything to do with Christmas? No. So points deducted for that. Why is it here? It's good, but why is it here? The next story is about a lady who gets saved by these, like, magical horsemen. They're called, like, Nikers? The Nikors? The something. The author claims that it's feminist. Me personally, I disagree. But I'm not even, anyways. Story 3 is about the elf on the shelf. And it's so scary. It's just scary. I don't want to talk about it anymore. The fourth story's cute. It's about a lady who meets Jack Frost. It was fine. The fifth story is told from the perspective of an elf who goes to a sugar plum fairy party. I had to Google what dollification was before starting the story. I don't think I like it. The sixth story is about the tree. You know what? He's consent king right there. I don't know what else there is to say. In case anyone was wondering how or why that happened, a lady wished for a boyfriend. Her name is Holly Oakley, so Santa got confused about her species type and brought a tree to life because he thought she was a tree. Santa thought she was a sentient tree writing him a letter, so he gave her a sentient tree. Seventh story is a surprisingly compelling enemies to lovers romance between the Nutcracker and the Rat King. Eighth story is about a lady and the gingerbread man she made. Me personally, I'm not a fan of vor. And the last story is like the Christmas Carol, and it's genuinely very devastating and very emotional. I got choked up. It's the best one. 'Tis the season for Railed by the Krampus. Brought to us by the brilliant mind behind Railed by the Easter Bunny comes Railed by the Krampus, a Christmas necessity. Young Holly carries a lot of responsibilities on her back, mainly providing for her family. And in order to avoid being married off, she makes a deal with the Krampus. And also Santa, ? This then leads to Holly being sent on a sort of scavenger hunt where she has to gather things for the next 12 days of Christmas, like on day 1, a partridge to be put in a pear tree. Day 2, 2 turtle doves. And every time she brings one of these items from the list back to Krampus or Santa, she gets a reward. I think Dahlia Davies is the only one who can really provide an absurd-sounding idea and then follow through with a genuinely very well-written romance that you can't help but root for. She gives so much complexity and depth to our main character, but also the Krampus, and their chemistry is so off the charts I got a little emotional towards the end, I will not lie. It's a novella, it's on KU, it slaps. I just read Boogeyman Booty Call also. My mom made a TikTok account and follows me. Hey queen. Let me set the stage for you because it actually reminded me a bit too much of Monsters, Inc. Okay, so Laura, single mom, her ex-husband and father of her child, Amy, abandoned them because he is literally garbage. Amy's 6, she's having some behavioral issues, but like who wouldn't? But bad kids get visits from the boogeyman. So insert Gary. Gary is a boogeyman by profession, but also just like he is, you know? So he gets assigned random bad children. He's been assigned to Amy for weeks, but she literally loves him. Like she's not scared of him at all. Side note, Gary's single and lonely and goes on a monster dating app and matches with Laura, who he's had a crush on like the whole time. His name is Gary. This couple's really into public stuff. 3.5 stars. Okay, let's talk about the Fated Over 40 series, the 10-book series that is dedicated solely to middle-aged men in a small town who shift into bears, with the exception of the one immortal dragon. So I didn't like any of them. Not a single book in this technically 11-book series went above 2.5 stars, and yet I still couldn't really tear my eyes away from the progressing storylines because I needed to know 2 things. The first, if they ever improved, spoiler warning, no. And the second being if the author really would commit to starting every single book in the series with a one-night stand that resulted in them being like, we shouldn't be together, and then also being forced to be around each other, and then also the woman being put in a near-death experience that she had to be rescued from before they're happily ever after. And the answer is yes. The answer is no to if they ever got better, but the answer is yes to the author sticking to this very specific formula. Even the second chance romance where they were high school sweethearts and then separated for a very long period of time, it starts with a one-night stand. Even the one where they're trying to have a surrogate baby and this woman just volunteers to be the surrogate, they make the baby. And then they're like, we should keep it profesh. Even the one where they start off with a mixer for singles, and the matchmaker and this guy, the bear, are bonding over slut-shaming some woman for being too desperate and wanting to take a guy home that night. They moments after they've bonded over slut-shaming this random woman, go home together for a one-night stand. And one would think in this long series of small-town bear shifters, with the exception of the one dragon, that they would be a lot more interesting than they are, but they're not. They're not even like offensive, they're just weirdly boring, which also doesn't make sense because they are very specifically about middle-aged, small-town bear shifters, with the exception of the one dragon. Even in the Dragon Romance, where it introduces a Latina heroine, I saw the last name Perez, and she called her son Mijo, and I was like waiting for something offensive in her depiction, and it's not really offensive, it's just underdeveloped and boring, which makes everything all the more shocking when nearly every single book also has a very bloody fight to the death or fight to the near death between like this really evil Johnston family. Like, when I tell you the fights are graphic and like bizarre and unnerving in their level of violence, I mean that. Do I recommend this series? No. Here's my ranking of them anyways, which doesn't say much. Yes, I will go in depth about Tyrannosaurus sex. Let me just... Tyrannosaurus Sex is a 9-page novella about a woman who falls in love, I guess it's love, with a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now you may be wondering, Gracie, if this takes place in modern day, how is she sexting a Tyrannosaurus Rex? Well, let me tell you, they pull a Jurassic Park, but when they pull this Jurassic Park-esque move of reviving and bringing back dinosaurs, they realize that dinosaurs, just as a whole in general, are much more intelligent than previously thought, so they integrate them into society instead of turning them into a dinosaur zoo. But they're not fully integrated like equal to human. I don't know if they have voting rights. I'm not sure if that's explored, but they are mainly used for like security firms and like farming purposes, but they're sentient and they could hold conversations and, you know, maintain relationships with humans. Our story begins with some woman who's like sexting and developing an online relationship with some guy she meets online, except she doesn't know what he looks like, doesn't know what his voice sounds like, they've never called, they've never FaceTimed, which is wildly unsafe because then they agree to meet up. But the location, this guy, this dinosaur that she doesn't know is a dinosaur yet, wants her to meet up at, is a security, not a warehouse, it's not facility, which is so egregiously shady, and she just goes anyway. So she goes up to this like warehouse facility and he shows up, and then she sees him and she's like, "You're not a person." And he's like, "No, I'm not." And she goes inside the facility with him anyways to his, I believe it was a dinosaur nest. And then things get frisky, and this is where my issue sort of lies. The 9 pages of this story, if you could even call it a story, it feels like just like one scene in a story, but it ends in the middle of them having sex, which I think is so bizarre. The author ends it smack dab in the middle of this one scene, not even like a story, of this one scene, to attempt to drive traffic to another story that also, I believe, has another collection of stories that promote the next collection of stories, and it just feels like one elaborate ad. This book is not interesting, well-written, or even like entertaining or funny enough to really drive that sort of traffic or incentivize anybody to go out of their way to exit out of this book and download another book to finish that one scene. In short, my issue is that the author thinks they did a much better job than they actually did.
Do you know what this is about? This is about a farm girl and a dinosaur.
Stop tagging me in this. Freaking... I'm on it.
It's tomorrow now. I hesitate to rate the book above a 3 because the actual story about the Allosaurus Rex and the farm girl reads more like a horror story, Jurassic Park fan fiction. And if this had been advertised as a horror story, I think I would have rated it much higher, but it wasn't. So I got a little scared, I'm not gonna lie to you. The rest of the book just feels like a giant ad. It's an anthology, but it's really just Wet Hot Allosaurus Summer, the first 3 chapters of some other dinosaur book, and then like little brief book descriptions for like 10 other books with, and then okay, so There's just a bunch of dinosaur sex facts at the end. Creative, but it's a 3 out of 5. It's 24 pages and called Milked by the Balloon Monster. Of course I read it. Milked by the Balloon Monster begins as all great stories do, with a fed-up woman in STEM. Kiara hates her research team because they're all in it for all the wrong reasons. Fame, attention, money. She's the only honorable one there who just gets horny to balloons. Legitimately, problem number 1 was the hypocrisy in that introduction. Problem number 2 comes when she meets the actual balloon man, because the experiments worked So, I feel like if you as an author want me committed to this idea, you shouldn't plant the seed throughout multiple paragraphs that the balloon man in question might be a baby. Bonus points for the originality and the sci-fi elements. Points deducted for potential balloon pedophilia. Okay, we need to talk about the 54-page Omegaverse romance novella about balloon animal shifters that I found completely on accident the other day because the title and the taglines and stuff feel a little bit misleading. They are not technically, I think, balloon animal shifters. They're men who were born, or not born. Can balloon animals be born? They were balloon animals first and then turned into humans because of like a circus witch that wanted to keep them as slaves. So like, first of all, let's get that out of the way. They don't even really shift into their balloon animal's original form unless they're sleeping, but also always have balloon animal parts. But also, those aren't always there. They're described as being smooth like Ken dolls. There's 2 of them. By the way, this is okay. It's a poly romance with 2 men and 1 lady. Smooth like a Ken doll. Technically, they can bring balloon parts out on command. And honestly, the magic system is all very underdeveloped. I wanted more information on that circus witch.
Penetrated by the president's Twitter feed.
It's only 16 pages. The dedication just says, "For Diane. She knows what she did." Brought to us by the brilliant mind behind kissing the coronavirus, we have Penetrated by the President's Tweet. We open up on Beth, who is a terrible, horrible person sleeping with her best friend and also next door neighbor's husband behind her back. But apparently he isn't even good at it, and so in order to enjoy the time they spend together, she reads President Trump's tweets. And then she's also a computer genius at some lab, so she makes robots and accidentally creates a robot AI physical embodiment of his Twitter feed. There's a line where she goes up and she's like, "I went up to the bot," in parentheses, that's short for robot, and I almost peed myself laughing. 4 stars. There's wine in this, and there's 30 minutes until the new year. I'm currently reading super short novellas to hit 200 books in 2021, and I just read this. Unfortunately, or fortunately, if you're into cold plastic, this is what you think it is. A security guard gets a job at a mall, and her first night, surprisingly terrifying, reminds me of the Twilight Zone in the worst way. Here are your content warnings. I give it a solid 2.5. I'd rate it higher if we got some background on the lore. Like, why is this mannequin alive? Is he the only one? Do they take turns? What is his intelligence level at? Why? There are tears in my eyes. I am reading Cowboy Dragon. I'm fine with dragon shifting cowboys. I'm even fine with one of them being a tiger shifter and them having beef with this wolf gang. But what I refuse to accept is Marion. Marion is our leading lady. And she was just so in awe of all of the hard work these ranchers do. And they were asking her what her favorite places in Texas were. And she said she said her dad took her there. She said she would never forget it. I've become something of a cowboy dragon romance novel expert in the past few days. There's a lot to unpack. Let's have a discussion. Before anyone asks, these are all on Kindle Unlimited. So it all started with Cowboy Dragon, which is book 1 in the Texas Dragon series, which I feel is misleading because out of the 5 shifter ranchers on Dragon Claw Ranch in Texas, only 3 out of the 5 are dragon shifters. One of them, Dallas, my favorite, is a tiger shifter, and the last one, Reno, who I'm neutral on, is a rogue alpha wolf. This entire series is bad in a way that read like parody, and so as someone from Texas, I laughed so hard that I nearly peed myself multiple times. In case anyone was wondering, Cowboy Dragon, you know, book 1, is the one where the woman says her favorite place in all of Texas is the Alamo. From there, Amazon recommended Cowboy Dragon's Next Door Neighbor, which is by a completely different author and is in no way related to the initial series. And this is filled to the brim with domestic violence and sexual assault. This was bad in a way that made me very angry. It just wasn't even funny, so I literally couldn't find a single ounce of joy from this. Then I read Cowboy Dragon's Single Mother, and this feels very misleading because this is not about the Cowboy Dragon's mother. His love interest is a single mother. So it's like his single mother. Are you following along? This also has to do with domestic violence and like new starts. And this was bad in a way that wasn't funny, not because of how disturbing it was, but because of how bland it managed to be, despite incorporating a dragon cowboy. Small Town Dragon Cowboy didn't even feel like a romance. It was so irrelevant to the plot and had much more to do with like government conspiracy and a mystery, which also sounds a lot more interesting than it is, because this, too, was bland. We don't even know the Cowboy Dragon's name until like 77% of the way in. Dragon Cowboy Rancher was very annoying because it attempted a really like dramatic murder mystery with like this questionable depiction of a gay side character. I actually just had to go back and read my review to remember what went on because I can't remember a single thing from this book beyond there being a misuse of the word Karen. And yeah, at the end of my review, I called it aggressively forgettable. It thinks it's a lot more interesting than it is. I also forgot the guy was a dragon. It was so irrelevant to anything. And finally, I read Grumpy Dragon Cowboy. This is the most well-written dragon cowboy romance I have ever read, which pissed me off when we got to the big confrontation at the end because the author did what I hoped she wouldn't do. In case anyone cares, this is ranking from best to worst for dragon cowboy romances. Apologies in advance for everything that's about to happen. So the other day, Lomi sent me a tweet that featured this picture, which I have censored heavily because, duh. And just to clarify for anyone confused, this is a man bending a woman over in shark-infested waters. She is bleeding from the mouth. There is a shark this close to her head. She has no qualms with anything. So I started the book, obviously. I have only read the opening paragraph, and it left me so befuddled that I had to pause, highlight, reread, and create a diagram. Review to come immediately after this diagram discussion, but what possesses anyone to write my mother's cousin's husband's niece? What is wrong with you? This is my 3rd draft of the diagram to give myself a visual on what that means. His mother's cousin's husband's niece. I refuse to allow this book to touch anything past 2 stars based on this frustration alone of making me think more than I need to create a proper visual on the opening paragraph sentence, my mother's cousin's husband's niece. 3 days later, I finished it. It's 1.5 stars. Of all of the consensual, intimate moments between those 2 characters, I think it's genuinely very disturbing and unsettling that someone chose the one objectively non-consensual act to turn into fan art. The woman does in fact have many qualms. She is literally fighting for her life and being tortured. But okay, let's get into the book. Does It Hurt is a dark romance about Sawyer, who is in fact a girl and not a boy like I thought when making the diagram. Does It Hurt is a dark romance about Sawyer, who is a dark past that she's running away from. She seduces men, steals her identity, takes out a credit card, and then finds a new victim once the money on that credit card situation runs out. This is how she meets Enzo, her love interest. One night stand, steals his identity. They develop feelings, but she still runs and takes out a credit card. He hunts her down to punish her and torture her for stealing his life. And like, I know identity theft is a serious crime. I know this, but Enzo never like calls the police or his bank, I guess. And if he does, it's a blink and you miss it mention, because he immediately goes into hunting mode. Puts her on his boat. He has a boat because he's a shark researcher. Then he violates her while also almost killing her. Their boat crashes. They end up at a lighthouse with a really creepy old man, and they have to try and survive together and escape. The characters are really two-dimensional edgelords that get on my nerves constantly. The dialogue is overly repetitive and very melodramatic at the most random times. Enzo especially is repetitive in the amount of times he insists that he's the only one who's allowed to hurt her. I give it 0.5 points for the mystery elements. Overall, it's just like overwritten and underdeveloped. I didn't like this at all. So whenever I see book Twitter dogpiling a monster romance book based solely on the description, I always give that book the benefit of the doubt, because half the time the books are pretty good and it really is just a matter of judging a book by its cover. So I read Made of My Existence. This was not pleasant or enjoyable in the slightest. But I'm not going to sit here and say that book Twitter was right to judge it. I don't have an issue with this guy being some like lion-human hybrid creature thing. That is not my biggest concern. My biggest concern is the actual contents of the book. You are uncomfy with him being a lion with a man bun. I'm uncomfy with him being an ex-cop who loved being a cop and quit because of anti-creature discrimination from violent human civilians, and him being fed up with a lack of protection for the police against the human civilians. I'm uncomfortable with how this age gap is handled. I, in general, don't have issues with age gap romances. I think I'm pretty neutral on the subject, but what I do get icked out by often with these age gap romances is that they always make the older member of the relationship really weird and creepy about the age gap. Like, there's a moment in this guy, his name's Ben, by the way, there's a moment in this guy's head where he's like thinking about Elora, the human woman, our like main character, right? And sandwiched in between his very intense lust for this woman is a moment where he talks about how he feels protective of her like a father. He feels a fatherly protection over her. I feel like if you feel any real sense of guardianship or like parental role or anything close to it for someone you have romantic or sexual feelings for, you need to be put on a list. That's very odd. And then on top of that, the way that he speaks about this age gap, about how old he feels, about how young this woman is, about how he feels almost fatherly, you'd think he's 50. He's just 35. It's a 10-year age gap. He's 35. He isn't even old enough to be her father. I don't know why that was mentioned. He also just has a very blatant fetish for human women, and I'm not sure if the author knows that that's what she did, but the way that he talks about how he loves human women, how he's only ever dated human women, how there's just something about human women that makes them different. I got flashbacks to the many DMs I've gotten from white guys who exclusively have a thing for Latinas. It was just so familiar in the most like nauseating way possible. There's also a moment in his like internal narration when we switch over to his perspective where he's like mentally cheering Elora on in the workspace. They work in like a tech office corporation setting, and he mentally cheers her on by being like, "Yas." And then there's this line. And I don't care that he's a lion. We have bigger fish to fry. Also, the chemistry is non-existent. I think Elora is very boring. I think a lot of the drama comes from her weird, like, situationship with that other dude that she's kind of seeing, where you're kind of sitting there and you're like, why won't you break it off? Because even Elora is like, why won't I break it off? And it's incredibly boring. The writing feels very clunky. The world building is very, like, lackluster and also underdeveloped. Ben is just a very unsettling love interest, in my opinion, for reasons that have nothing to do with him being a creature and everything to do with, like, his personality. This book also just made me question what would qualify as slavery in this setting. Ben, who is a lion, owns 2 cats. And so I extend my question onto you. I think if you are someone who's looking for a monster office rom-com, Kate Pryor is, like, my favorite. Love Laugh Lich is fantastic, and so is the orc from The Office. They're funny, they're silly, they're a good time, they have great chemistry, they're really lighthearted. But overall, not the most fun way to get back to adding to my Wildcard Romance playlist. So I read this spicy adult romance about a woman and her sentient apartment door, which is a book, of course, brought to us by the same mind that created the balloon animal shifter romance. I think Unhinged by Vera Valentine can be categorized as either a romantic thriller or a suspenseful romance. Because I'm not gonna lie to you, this book gets so spooky scary. I'm not joking. So here's the story. Our main character is the door, obviously. He doesn't have a name until like the halfway point of the book, which becomes Driss. But he's a door, and he's madly in love with the woman who lives in his like apartment thing. She's the best tenant who's ever lived there. She's also gorgeous, stunning. She's amazing. She looks like Linda Evangelista. Does Tana know this? No, because he's a door. Here's what the door does know. That Tana's landlord is he's so scary. Tana's landlord is a sexual predator who is also a murderer. Now, Tana knows that she's very uncomfortable with this man who is always trying to get into her house, always trying to like bother her, but only the door knows that he has murdered another tenant before. Another young woman who rejected his advances. And so the door knows that Tana's next. He's her landlord. He has a master key. He breaks in when she's not home and steals her underwear. But what can the door do? He is just a door. Right? Wrong. He's not just any door. He's the son of Zeus. So Zeus visits the door and he's like, hey, my wife says that I need to fix myself, basically. And funny story, I used to frequent this very special orchard where this particular dryad was at, and one day there was this tree with a very enticing hole, and Zeus is like, I'm your dad, and the tree is like, okay. And Zeus is like, okay, so my wife wants me to be like better or whatever. And I know you're really into this girl. And I know that she is going to die if there's no intervention. I'm not going to help, but I can kind of help. And so I'm going to let you communicate to this woman you love in her dream. And then you need to give her these instructions if you want to become a human man. Zeus tells him, like, if she gets freaky with you as a door, not in the dream, as a door, then you will become a man in real life. And then you can protect her and also just like love her. And the door is like, oh my god, yes, I can finally like protect this woman, like beyond being a door to her home. So he goes into Tana's dream and Tana's like, what the fuck? Tana's rightfully so. Just like, that is the dumbest, weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. Get away from me. The door is like, no, you have to believe me. And Tana's like, this is a dream. No, I will not. But here's the thing. Tana is scared of her landlord. Tana knows that he's like a creep at the very least. So one day she's like talking to the cops because they're investigating this like recent murder that's happened, and she's really scared of her landlord, and she knows there's something off about him, and she's also been drinking, and so she's alone in her apartment, and she's like, okay, who's gonna know but me, right? Tana's like, worst case scenario, I'm one of those idiots that ends up in the ER for sticking things where they should not be stuck into. And then sure enough, the next morning there is a man and her door is gone. Now look, I can see the appeal of this romance falling into the category of like stories about men who quite literally only exist to serve and love this woman, right? The thing that makes me disconnect a lot from it is that this is this does unfortunately fall into like the born sexy yesterday trope, which for anyone who doesn't know is a trope that we mainly see with a lot of women in like media, like in film and television. I think the most popular example of it is The Fifth Element, where we have a very sexy, attractive adult character who just becomes conscious or sentient or like gets introduced to Earth incredibly recently, like the day of the story beginning. And so this sexy adult has the ignorance and the confusion and the, I guess, personality almost of like a very small child or baby. And we get a cute like 2-second montage of like Driss and Tana being like kind of cute, kind of sexy, whatever, before we're back to being spooky scary, and we watch the landlord try to murder Tana in her own home. Already after trying to poison her previously. The ending's wild, and I'm not choosing to like not describe it because I want people to go read it. I mean, sure, I'm not gonna spoil it for you regardless. Go read it if you want to. But I'm also just very confused about like some of the logistics and the sequence of events. But long story short, it is a romance, so it does get a happily ever after, even if I don't fully understand the details surrounding that happily ever after. I think Vera Valentine's mind is a very wonderful, unique, and fascinating place to just like peek into every once in a while. And this book being the first thing I read at like 9 a.m. today has definitely set the tone for my entire Saturday. Anyways, I will continue to spend the rest of this Saturday reading even more unhinged monster shifter alien romances. So I've read 2 books today. The first one being a romance novel between a woman and her sentient door. The one immediately following it up being a full-length novel called All I Wanted Was Sushi, But I Got Abducted by Aliens Instead. And in spite of the first one being a novella about a woman and a door, this is the one I don't think I would recommend. And it really is from like the sheer whiplash that it gives you from start to finish. It's over 200 pages and it just does not let up of... It's a lot. Like, we're unironically going from like terrifying abduction and like imminent threat of sexual violence to horny feelings to violence to near-death experiences, back to horny, back to near-death, back to attempted murder, back to horny, back to a romance, back to attempted murder, club, another bus, club. And we have this like really disturbing, horrifying content being just like 2 paragraphs of separation away from sex scenes. It is all like squished together with no real breathing room, no proper transitions into topics, and it's overwhelming from the opening page, and it doesn't stop being overwhelming and disorienting and just like odd in an unfun way all the way through the final chapter. So this is the plot. Our main character, she got off a shift at work. She's like a waitress, and all she wanted to do was go get sushi, as the title implies. And at some point on this trip to go get sushi, she gets abducted by aliens. But the opening page is her waking up and finding out that she was abducted by aliens. She wakes up in the middle of being like probed, I guess, and like injected with something by these alien creatures that she is trying really hard to fight off. And there are other human women on the ship. She speaks and meets another human woman named Jessie, who tells her that she personally has been with these aliens and like I guess owned by these aliens for about 2 to 3 years. And Jessie what is her name? Oh my god, I cannot remember. What is Opal? And Jessie informs our main character Opal that they have been human trafficked into alien sex slavery, and that they're en route to like a intergalactic alien strip club. But for convenience sake, for the romance story that's about to happen between Opal and this alien that she meets at the intergalactic strip club, is that all of the women that this particular race of aliens abducts and steals are unattached. They don't have family or friends who will miss them, and they're just like nobodies, I guess. Oh, and also like the shot that these aliens, what do they call it, Dreeks? Deans, they administer like these injections that make you horny, I guess. And the bus thing that's taking these human women to work gets stuck in traffic. Of course it does. It gets stuck in space traffic, and Opal is like riding the high of this injection and trying to just like get rid of these feelings, and then has a moment out the window with this shark-looking alien man. His name is Keon, I think that's how it's pronounced. He ends up being the love interest because Keon ends up already being on the way to this club where he sees Opal again, and he's like, oh my god, she's the one. This is my mate. Here's the thing about Keon. Keon is the crown prince of this alien society that we are living in right now. Also, Keon hates his parents. That's a whole other thing though. But the big conflict is that like the Deans are this alien race of aliens who human traffic human women from Earth and then smuggle them over and then lie that these are human women who have gone through the like immigration process, who are really excited to be there and actually really want to be there, and have been decontaminated. Everything's legal. And so Keon's under the impression that Opal wanted to be there and like that she really wants to get like more out of her experience. And so he's like, let me take you away from here. And she's like, I'll go wherever you go as long as it's not here. And then there's like an assassination attempt on both of their lives. And then Keon is informed by Opal that she was kidnapped and none of this is legal and this is actually really awful and terrible and bad. And then Keon and Opal get stuck in like a thing, and then they sleep together, and then Keon's like, I'm in love with you, and Opal's like, I think I love you too. And Keon is like, oh, also I'm the prince and I'm gonna take you to my castle. And Opal is like stressed, but she's like, okay. And then people are like slut-shaming Opal, and then there's another assassination attempt, and then Keon's parents straight up die. So now Keon's about to be king. Mind you, I think this entire love story takes place in like about 3 or 4 days. Keon wants to marry her and Opal says yes, and so now she's gonna be the new queen, and it's only after she agrees to marry him within like the 2 days that they've known each other that like Keon even learns what her last name is. And Opal's like, I guess last names aren't important when you're on the run and like fearing for your life and also in love. I would argue that last names are absolutely important. I think we should know who we're marrying. And there's more assassination attempts. And then Keon like wants his first like mission as king to commit genocide against the entire Dean's race. And like this is where the romance and like Keon as a love interest loses me even more, because sorry, genocide is kind of an ick for me. No thank you. Like, yes, you've only ever seen like the most horrific examples of like Deans existing, but also I do not care if this is fiction. I don't care. I do not care. There is no way that like 100% of any race or species is like objectively amoral and bad. You're gonna sit here and tell me that you created an entire race of aliens and not a single one is like normal? Innocent? What do you mean 100% of this population is the worst? So it's genocide in the name of justice, and Keon and Opal get married, and then like they're talking about whether or not they're compatible enough to like get pregnant. I don't think at any point in time we're really sitting with this couple as a couple. When they're not having sex with each other, they're trying to not be murdered. And there is zero moment of like actual connection. And this is what bothers me about like a good chunk of fated mate romances, is that they get really lazy. They get so incredibly lazy and think that you don't need to develop a romance or a believable love story because magic and a goddess has already decided that like that instant connection is there, and you can skip all like the necessary steps it takes for a relationship to develop. I'm sorry, but no, you need to make me believe it. You need to make me believe it just a smidge. The only thing I really enjoy about this book is a scene where Opal makes up a human custom by Saint Beyonce in order to get out of something with some new alien kidnappers. That was funny. That was good. That's it. I just think it's very strange that instead of giving us like any world building or character or relationship development, the author decided to instead give us an immeasurable amount of stress. Anyways, how's your weekend going? Mine's the way that it is. So I'm feeling slightly bamboozled that Seduced by the Pumpkin Spice Latte doesn't actually feature a sentient pumpkin spice latte, but it is still a very silly, very fun book that I highly, highly, highly recommend. So here's a story. Melissa loves pumpkin spice lattes, and she wakes up before her alarm on day 1 of pumpkin spice lattes being back at Starbucks. And from the jump, she's already questioning some feelings because she shares with us that she feels the same way about pumpkin spice lattes as she does whenever she sees a really attractive person, like Channing Tatum or Channing Tatum's wife. So she puts on her Uggs and her leggings and her 2 oversized shirts and her 3 scarves and goes to Starbucks. And upon entering a weirdly empty Starbucks, notices that all of the baristas are also weirdly attractive. The 2 ones standing out to her being the goth girl who takes her order and some hot guy with an afro. And Melissa goes upstairs to the like more secluded hangout area of this very empty Starbucks and takes that first sip and she's overwhelmed with a sensation. Now, does this book feature a sentient pumpkin spice latte? No, and I was and will always be disappointed by that fact. She does, however, do things with the pumpkin spice latte. And then what really kicks up a notch is that the 2 really hot baristas from earlier come up and notice, and they're like, we knew it. We knew you were one of us, a pumpkin spice sexual. And then the 3 of them, and during, they're pouring the pumpkin spice latte. I think the author is a comedic genius. I think her brain should be studied by scientists. I think this needs to go down as something revolutionary in terms of just the whole of human history. And there's nothing anyone can say or do to make me feel ashamed that this is my first read of September. So I read the spicy romance about a woman and her sentient pillow. If I had a nickel for every time I read an erotic short story on Kindle Unlimited about a woman falling in love with a sentient element of her apartment that is magically sentient for reasons that are so bizarre and out of left field, a way that you could never predict, and then gained a human form in order to protect her from her creepy predatory landlord, and also gains that happily ever after through murder, I'd have 2 nickels. This isn't even written by the same woman who wrote the Door romance, although they do seem to be author friends, which made all the sense in the world. So here's the story. Anne has what I can only assume to be contamination OCD. She has a thing about germs and smells and sweat that comes off of human skin. And so because of that, she doesn't really socialize with people in person. She has a lot of online friends, but she doesn't like interacting much with her coworkers. As soon as she's done with work, she clocks out and goes straight home. She also can never see herself getting into any sort of romantic or physical relationship with any 3-dimensional living human person. Animated characters, however. Anne loves anime, and Anne really loves Black Butler. Is the title ever explicitly said? No. But I know it! Here's what Anne doesn't know. Her favorite pillow on her bed at home is alive and also madly in love with her. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Gracie, is this pillow also the son of Zeus? To that I say, no, you idiot. It is made up of the magical feathers of a dead phoenix. There was a phoenix that fell in love with a goose and died and reincarnated as a goose. Where did the phoenix come from? I don't know. But then the goose got cooked. Boo! And the feathers made its way into a pillow, maintaining a magical spark that was just enough to bring it to life, but not let it do much else. Here's the thing, on top of that other thing, the pillow has the capacity to gain more power in order to shapeshift and take on a more desirable physical form. And this is where we get into the scenes that will quite literally haunt my nightmares for, I think, the rest of my life. The pillow has the ability to take life force from other living creatures, and needs to take life in order to have life, I guess. And right now, the only life that it really has access to is Anne, the love of his life, who he would never harm or take life force from. And random bugs, like a fly, he'll just fly in. Pillow is growing stronger and stronger by the day, but also very, very slowly. Until one day, one of Anne's really creepy coworkers shows up at her apartment and then just like lets himself in and tries to like get it on with her. And he sits on her bed, trying and failing to convince her to just like sleep with him while she's literally crying. And the moment his hand touches that pillow, the pillow like latches on magically and sucks the life force out of this man. And as traumatic as it is enough for the pillow to start transforming himself into a man. Not quickly though, okay, Anne comes home while the transformation is still happening, and he's described as being like unfinished in the most horrific way. He's fully formed from the waist down, with like pants and everything. But then his torso is a pillow, his head is another pillow, his arms are more pillows, the top pillow has a face, and then Anne faints, which like, so true. He gets to look kind of like a normal person, but he tells her that he really only exists to love her, which is such an ick for me. I'm sorry. I said it with the door, I'm saying it again. I don't like that trope. Have some independence. Disagree on something, I don't know. But since he can transform his body however he wants, and he exists for Anne, he can modify his body to Anne's very specific, like, specifications. And so he models himself after Sebastian from Black Butler. And then also can change the shape of a certain something during the act. And you know what? I don't care if this comes off as nitpicky or unreasonable given the subject matter. But there are some parts of this book that were just unrealistic and strange. Beyond, I know. But there's a scene where she's like, she realizes that she basically has like a weapon of a man who's obsessed with her. And she can like get revenge on all of her like sexual harassers and like these local sexual predators. And she quite literally is described as rubbing her hands together and going, "Wahahaha." I'm sorry. No. The suspension of disbelief can only go so far. There are such things as limitations. And you've crossed them. You've destroyed them. You've left them in the dust. I also just have a pet peeve about authors adding random disabilities to like creepy villainous figures in order to enhance their creepiness. Her predatory like weird landlord has a glass eye, and the description is thrown in as like a list of things that make him like visually unsettling. And it's not a major thing. It is still something. This is my TikTok page. I'm gonna talk about it. I also think the ending of the book is so weird and unsettling, like a little bit spooky scary. Like it's established that this pillow is going to need to like take life force for the rest of his life, but not too much, because if he takes too much then he'll be fully human, and then he cannot transform his body however he wants. So he has to like toe the line for the rest of his life in order to like be at peak existence, I guess, for Anne. But he does kill, and he probably will kill again. I think Anne as a main character is like fine. I have to question her attraction to this man who like had long hair covering one eye while he bit his lip at her. Like, yeah, he's also a pillow and you're fine with that, but I need us to have like standards. Overall, 1.5 out of 5. And the only reason why I'm really rating it that high is because, you know, I love to see a predator like die, you know? So I read the published work of Taylor Swift Travis Kelce fanfiction that was available on Kindle Unlimited hours before the author scrubbed any mention of it from the internet. And also it was really bad, so let's talk about it. Roughing the Princess is a 100-ish page novella that was published and posted about 2 or 3 days ago by the author Ivy Smoke. And just a disclaimer before I get a bajillion trillion comments like this, because I do on every single addition to my Wildcard Romance playlist. This is an independently published book. This is an indie author. This is not through traditional publishing. I don't think I've ever mentioned a single traditionally published novel on any Wildcard Romance video. So I should not be seeing comments being like, well, if this can get published, then I can get published. Or they'll just publish anything these days. No, they won't. You do it yourself. This is just a slightly more elaborate Wattpad without a comment section. Okay, mini rant over because it gets really, it's so annoying. Robbing the Princess is the story of Tova Saber, T.S., who is a multi-Grammy award-winning pop star. She's blonde. She has an iconic red lip. She's known for writing heartbreak songs. And she is being pursued by a popular football player who runs a podcast with his brother, had a beard and recently shaved to a mustache, has two... What's the football thing? It's not World Series. It's not World Series. Super Bowl! He has 2 Super Bowl rings. And he's a dog dad, and his name is Talon Kendrick, TK. I think I just got to the bottom of why I cannot bring myself to take interest in even a sports romance. Okay. So Travis has a crush on Tova, and he's made it very semi-publicly known that he has a crush on her, and he talks about it with his brother, who is honestly the worst, insufferable, annoying, headache-inducing, an absolute nuisance of a human being. And Talon goes to one of her concerts hoping to like get her number or like give her his number, and then it just doesn't work out. And so his brother brings it up on their podcast, and then it goes viral because of course it does. But then because the brother brought up him trying to give Taylor his number, Tova, because his brother kept trying to bring up that he tried to give Tova his number, then everyone knows about it, and then his number does make its way to Tova. And they start texting and they start flirting, and the lack of chemistry is honestly astounding. It's not even like all that much. Actually, it is disturbing. But its biggest crime is that it is also boring. They're texting all the time. They're sexting all the time. They send sexy photos to each other. At some point, Travis reveals that in high school, he lost his virginity to a girl while listening to one of her songs and then pretended that it was Tova the whole time. And for whatever reason, she's not disturbed by the reveal. And there's the most bizarre professional love over text before these two have even met in person, after this woman has like stood him up on numerous dates in the public eye. I think the relationship takes place across less than 2 months. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't know if this author likes Taylor Swift, because the way that Tova is depicted is just sort of like she's always writing lyrics about her most recent heartbreak. There's a really funny line where Talon talks about not being just another lyric. The writing is bizarre, the dialogue is cringe, the characters are insufferable. I cannot think of a single non-annoying character in this entire book, and also the relationship is so rushed and sloppy and weird. The book isn't even bad, like, in a way that can even be funny. I was just waiting for it to be over the whole time. Actually, that's a lie. There's a part in the very beginning of the book where we're, like, starting the sex scene that the whole book builds up to, and Talon's character goes, "Wait a minute. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation. Let's go back to the beginning." And that made me giggle in the middle of a Sam's Club. So there is that. So I read the 13-page novella about a woman and the were turkey in her home. Stuff by the Were Turkey is the story of a woman named Jo, who's been a lifelong vegan and is an active participant in the PETA organization. And the story opens up on her protesting anyone visiting a turkey farm to buy a live turkey to kill for Thanksgiving. And she rescues one of those turkeys and takes it home, outrunning a farmer. When she takes it home, she puts it in the bathroom to, like, keep it corralled in. And when she goes to check on the turkey, it becomes something new. I think the fact that the first thing she notices about this naked man with a turkey head is how large he is down there. They can't even communicate. I think that's what really gets me about this book, is that they cannot communicate and they do not communicate. He gobbles at her. What does that sound? Is that the official name for what sounds turkeys make? Gobbling? He makes noises at her while lunging at her, and she's okay with it. And worst of all, there's no lore. Not one scrap of lore. No son of Zeus, no magic phoenix feather. The man just exists, and I think that is so boring. What made him that way? What triggers a transformation? Why was he on a turkey farm if he can just turn into a man? Did he turn into a man because he had found his mate? Is this a fated mate story? I am taking too many questions to my grave, and I will haunt whoever's responsible.
When she bakes cookies for him and he makes fun of her until she cries and then listens to Not a Trace. Not a Trace is part 1 in an Omegaverse duology that I will not be finishing because I don't care enough about the mystery situation enough. I just wanted to read this. Because she does get hit by a car. Okay. This is the plot. This is an Omegaverse book. But here's where I'm confused. I thought Omegaverse meant that, like, you needed to be connected to, like, werewolves or some sort of shifter creature in some way. These are just people who are alphas and omegas and betas, and our main character is an omega, and she has to take suppressants for her heat. And I do a lot of Googling because I'm not very knowledgeable on Omegaverse things, but I did have to Google what nesting was. So this is the plot. Our main character is an omega who owns and operates a bakery, and her best friend who works at the bakery with her suddenly goes missing, and she's freaking out because it's very shady, it's suspicious, no one can get into contact with her. Her stuff is still in her house, but her car is missing, and she wouldn't just up and leave. So our main character goes to the police, as like anyone would do, and the police are essentially like, it's too early to tell, but he feels really bad for her, and so he's like, let me give you the number for these 2 detectives that I know. And the detectives are Landon and River, and they're 2 alpha detectives at their own agency, ? Landon is normal, River is just mean as shit for no reason. Sorry, he does have a reason. He's damaged goods. That's what he calls himself. I wanted to throw up. Why he's damaged goods, I do not know. I'm sure it's explained in the sequel, but I genuinely... So she goes to them and she's like, they're probably really busy. Why would they take on my case? So she makes them a batch of cookies. Macarons, to be specific. So she goes to try and convince them and also just like bake them cookies to low-key try and bribe them. She meets Landon first, and Landon is like, oh, these are amazing, and she's so nice, I want to try and help her, but we're so busy, we have such like a giant workload. And then River comes out and he's like, what the fuck, why are you trying to bribe me with cookies? Get out of here, dummy. So then she cries and she's like, I don't know what she said, but she was like that. And then she leaves the cookies there. And she runs out of the parking lot. She gets hit by a car. And River and Landon are like, what the fuck? And they go out and they're like, what? Their tears running down. So then they feel bad. She's fine, but she's like in pain or whatever. I don't even think anything's broken for some reason, even though it's written that she gets hit by this car so hard that both of her shoes. My sincerest apologies if anyone watching has car accident related trauma. This is so cartoonish. So then Landon and River feel responsible because like she asked them for help to find her missing friend who's like a sister to her, and then River was really mean about these cookies, and then she got hit by a car, so they're just trying to take care of her. Side note, River eats the cookies after this and it's like, these are the greatest cookies I've ever had in my life. So he feels extra bad. So then River is the one to take her home after the hospital, and he takes her home, and other side note, our main character, whose name I can't even like remember because she's so whatever, she used to have a boyfriend. I don't know what level he was. Is that even what you call it? Like levels? But he was like really toxic and mean to her and like implied that she doesn't deserve a pack. A pack of what? I don't know. But she's essentially like sworn off love and mating and like even sleeping with anybody. because she like doesn't think she deserves it. So River takes her home and is taking care of her, and then gives her his jacket, and she's going quite literally feral when she's like alone with it in her room and does stuff with his jacket. Respectfully, if I ever have to read the word slick ever again, I might just pass out. So then like blah blah blah, her and River do stuff, blah blah blah, her and Landon do stuff, but then like we'll switch from like these smutty tension-filled moments to like the real plot, which is her kidnapped missing best friend. There's mentions of like an omega drug that is hitting the market that like is killing people in some way, and like there's more omega disappearances. But this like really serious plot line takes such a dramatic backseat to just like this woman being really horny with these two alpha men. And it's like a why choose. So she's gonna end up with both of them. Okay, the cop, is his name Ben? Is that even the same guy we see? Hold on. Sorry. There is a cop that she talks to that gives her the detective's number. And then at the end of the book, she meets a cop, but I can't remember if that's even the same guy. I just know that he's older. He's in his 40s or something. I think our main character is like late 20s, early 30s. But this cop is older than all three of the people involved, and he's another alpha, and I think maybe in book 2 he's like the third addition to her pack of alphas. I don't know. The writing of this is cringe. The plot progression is it gave me whiplash. It's so absurd. Overly repetitive language at every turn, and the actual mystery is so underdeveloped and just like completely forgotten about by the author. But what I will say is I read this book because of these screenshots that I found on Twitter that are from Book Talk. I just don't know where. And they definitely lived up to what I was expecting. I can't really call this a disappointment when I went in only knowing these screenshots. Do I recommend the book though? No. I genuinely, this is so, nothing about it is compelling enough for me to like care about what happens in book 2. I saw what I came for. I'm done. She's mad at him because he let his girl best friend touch him. He didn't even notice, and he asked her, "Where did she touch me?" She brushes his arm, still pissed. I can already feel the tears. I can't do this. Viciously Yours is a book. I really do. I feel like, okay, here's my thing. I personally feel like if you know your book is bad and you feel compelled to give a warning page at the beginning of the book, like, hey, this might be bad. Hey, you might not like this. This might be bad for you. You should just not write the book. Also, I think this page features one of the funniest things I've ever seen, which is this opening paragraph, this opening section here. Yes, this is not your typical fantasy novel in the way that there's no overarching background plot or big villain. The plot focuses solely on the romance between the two main characters. She's not a regular novel. She's a romance novel. The real kicker, though, is to go through that whole page and then have there be something else, and it's this. What do you mean, good luck? I hate this, actually. Just keep it in the drafts at this point. Respectfully, telling me that this book was just written for fun and not to be taken seriously at all does absolutely nothing for me. Anyways, Viciously Yours is the story about these two people. One's a human and one's a fae prince. The human girl is an orphan. She doesn't know who her parents are. She's all alone. But in this world, fae royalty specifically gets, at one point, I think when they're 13, a voice whispering to them and them only the name of their fated mate, sending them on their journey to find this person with this name that is born on the same day as them. So Rennick, who for some reason goes by Nick instead of Ren, obsessively tracks down his mate and eventually finds this girl like a few years later while they're still teenagers. And for a good chunk of the story, we're just seeing like glimpses into like their lives at these different points of growing up, and then his letters to her, because he's like, hey, my mate, I can't wait to find you and marry you, and she doesn't know what's going on. And for some reason in this kingdom, she doesn't send a carrier pigeon to call ye old police. Anyways, we finally get to their 25th birthday where they're able to meet, and he takes her, and oh my god, I do not care. I think for a couple that's so insane and annoying, they're also just not that interesting. There's no chemistry. There's nothing exceeding a two-dimensional personality. There's no, like, actual connection. It's just, like, him being crazy and her being like, why do I like that? Girl, don't ask me. That's what I was trying to ask you. The vibe of this couple is so, like, the vibe of this couple is so, he was crazier than her, and she was his queen, and God help. Here's a separate thing about the plot. In the disclaimer, there's a whole thing about how there's no background plot. That is a lie. There is a background plot. In this kingdom, there is this rebellion group, like they're literally just referred to as the rebels, who are on a mission to completely annihilate and murder every member of the royal family and essentially overthrow their political system, which sounds very interesting. And then it makes you question, like, what's wrong with this royal family for there to be a whole rebel group? Because, like, spoiler, the queen, like, we see the queen, like, get fridged, basically. And so, like, we are entering the story from, like, the side of this royal family because, like, this girl is marrying into the royal family. And it's so, like, they keep having to talk about, like, this looming threat of the rebels. And there's one section where what's her face, the girl, Amelia, is like, hey, what's going on with these rebels? And literally the only explanation that's given is, like, some people just don't think it's fair that you can be born into power. I think we should unpack that, actually. I feel like there's no way that, like, we have to, there needs to be more discussion about this. Your mom just got murdered. I think this might be a colonizer romance, to be honest. It's also just cliched to high hell. Amelia, this whole book is like, I'm so boring, I'm so normal, I'm not special. But wait, why do all these magical things keep happening around me? The setup of, like, she's not special. Oh, wait. Or is she? She's actually the most special and she never knew it, is so lackluster. It is painfully lackluster. And at a certain point with this Nick guy, it gets so old and so stale so fast. How he's like, a man making eye contact with you? I would like to murder him. Get a new shtick, I beg. And I think, okay, and before all of the review police come and find me and are like, well, I liked it because I actually read for fun. I also read for fun. I just think that this book was really lazy. And I think if I can see the lack of effort, I no longer have fun anymore. And I've said this before. I've said this multiple times before with other books. I don't care if you have, like, non-existent world building. I don't care if you have, like, a shoddy magic system. But if you're gonna say that you're ignoring all of that to focus on the romance, why is the romance also not good? Why is the romance also not developed? Where did your focus go besides the warning pages plural? This book makes me feel like I'm losing my mind in the worst way possible. Do you want to talk about the Crocs romance? March 3rd, someone tweeted, apparently the latest sentient object romance book going viral is about a woman falling in love with a pair of Crocs. I looked at the replies, no one had the title or the author. I looked at the quotes, no one had the title or the author, though I did see this tweet that was very funny. Even after I quote tweeted and said, so no one has the title? No one gave me an answer, nor did anything show up when I typed Crocs into Kindle or Goodreads. But it's in times like these that I know that you guys, right here, this is my real community, because numerous people sent me the link to the author's TikToks promoting it. Thanks. Now let's discuss Help I Fell in Love with a Pair of Crocs by Ingeborg Sem, which is a book that you can only get through signing up for her newsletter. And many spoilers ahead, because this 30-page novella packs so much lore and I'm fascinated by it. So the story is this. Our main character is a woman named Chelsea who owns and operates a secondhand consignment store, right? She's also recently gotten out of an abusive relationship with her ex, who still comes around to intimidate her from time to time. We open up, though, on Chelsea going down to the shop to investigate after hours because she can hear the sound of men being intimate with one another. And she finds them. She finds these two men on a couch, and everyone immediately starts screaming, understandably so. But the thing about Chelsea is that she has been hesitating to call the police because there's just something about them. They're so pretty, and also there's something about them. She also is trying to find a recently acquired pair of Crocs that she loves. They're purple and they're sparkly, though they are secondhand. But I'm going to assume, because of the logistics surrounding the Crocs and these men, that they have remained in pristine condition despite being many years old. Chelsea has the men put on random clothes from the shop while they explain why they're there and what's happening, and Chelsea can't help but realize that one of the men is weirdly familiar, and she feels a mysterious attachment to him that she can't quite explain. It is revealed that she does know that man. She knows the both of these men because 20 years ago, they went missing without a trace, and it's been covered by numerous true crime podcasts. But she used to date the guy who was more familiar to her, Marco. That was her first love, right? They dated. But here's the thing. Marco was always in love with Chelsea. This was never up for debate. He also had feelings for Cody, who is the other man, but Cody not only comes from a magical witch family, but a homophobic family. So his Fapa, I don't know, I'm gonna assume that's his dad, maybe his grandfather, was so angry with him for having a boyfriend and like potentially ruining the continuation of their bloodline that he turned Cody and Marco into a pair of Crocs, specifically purple sparkly ones, because that was the color that they had painted each other's nails. And for some reason, part of this curse means that Marco and Cody can only turn back into a human at night when they are inside secondhand shops. Hence how they just appeared in the shop. Chelsea left her pair of Crocs down there. They are the pair of Crocs. And also why they were getting frisky, because apparently they don't get this opportunity often. And so apparently the only way to break the curse is if Cody participates in prolonging the bloodline. So then Chelsea is like, you need to impregnate someone. And Cody was like, no, just doing the deed is enough. Which is very weak magic, if I'm being completely honest, because how are you not going to think ahead? I just feel like if you're going to curse someone for not giving them what you want, and part of breaking the curse involves giving you what you want, you should make sure that you get what you want out of it. What do you mean? There's this major glaring loophole. I hate when a villain's stupid. And so, of course, Chelsea agrees to help these gentlemen break their curse because they're all very much into each other. Here's the thing, though. I don't think anything could have prepared me for the actual act of the curse breaking. Because I don't have it in me to explain in great detail, but you do need to know that Chelsea initiates that process while they're still in Croc form. You can say a lot about unhinged sentient object romances, but you can never call them unoriginal. So there's also a confrontation between Chelsea, her abusive ex, and also her new Croc boyfriends in between the time of her like meeting them as their human forms and when they go to do some curse breaking. Now, I'm left with quite a few questions regarding how these men re-enter society, right? Because it's established that they've been Crocs for the past 20 years, and they have been used and passed around by multiple people across many years. And it is also established that in their human forms they are aged, right? How are these Crocs not falling apart? How do you go back to living your life as a man full time, no longer being a Croc? Like, how do you explain where you come from? You're deceased, legally. And what's going on with the magical nature of Cody? And here's the thing.
If I had a nickel for every time I read one of these really weird and kind of silly sentient object romances that involves a polyamorous throuple where the two men are sentient objects who have been cursed by an evil witch from their past, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but weird that it's happened twice. But also I kind of love that it's its own subgenre at this point. Like, you know what I mean? All in all, I give this 2.5 out of 5 stars. Because it's not the worst thing I've ever read. So I read the spicy novella about sentient s'more elements. It's only 21 pages, and I have many thoughts. We open up on Theo and Graham, who are husbands. One is a chocolate bar, and the other is a graham cracker. Now, I disregarded the cover. Like, I looked at the cover and I was like, yes, they are those things. But then I opened up the book and for some reason thought that they were going to be personified food elements, and they're not. They are this. It's Valentine's Day. Theo and Graham are at a cabin getaway to celebrate, and they're very happy and minding their own business until all of a sudden a marshmallow bursts through the door. That's Jella. Now, one look at Jella and Theo and Graham are very concerned because she is slightly singed. Okay, she has quite literally been burned by her abusive ex, who she is outrunning because he did just attempt to murder her by throwing her into fire. Who is her ex? Cheeto. And I'm going to assume that it's a regular Cheeto because I know Hot Cheeto's heart, and a Hot Cheeto would never. So anyways, she's outrun Cheeto, and they let her stay there and they like help her with her wounds. But while they're helping her, she cannot help but notice how unreasonably attractive these two men are. But she doesn't do anything, and neither do they, and then they leave for the evening. They set her up in the guest room, they leave. She leaves the door open in the off chance they return, but they don't. But then she does hear noises. And goes to investigate, and she finds them together, and then doesn't leave. And then they see that she's there, and s'more. Now the ex does make a return, and they do need to fight him off in a conflict. That's not what I have a lot of questions about, though. There's one line from Jella's point of view, which she's talking about when she was outrunning Cheeto and was looking for like the nearest location, the nearest safe haven for her, and just picking a cabin at random and hoping as she chose that cabin that she hadn't chosen the home of a serial eater. And it's unclear if she's referring to human beings or fellow food items. But if she was referring to human beings, then I need at minimum 150 pages of world building and lore surrounding that situation. Are these comically large food items that are the same size as people, or are people regular people size and these are regular food size foods and they have their own tiny community? Are human beings like the monsters of this story? Do humans know that their food is sentient? Is this like a sausage party situation? Or is this more of a Cars situation where in this world, everyone's a sentient food item? Furthermore, if that's the case, what food is Jesus? My vote is that he's one of the communion crackers. Much to think about, much to discuss. But while we're on the topic of discussing weird books, I am going to be on a panel at Book Neck Fest at the end of May 24th and 25th to be specific. It's in Orlando, Florida, and I'm planning on being a panel discussing the weirdest books we've ever read, which is a panel that feels very specific to me personally. It's a free event, and information and schedules are still being rolled out, but I'm really looking forward to seeing who all is going to be there. Because I'm really excited to have these conversations in person. Hello, and let's discuss the confirmed self-published B-movie fanfiction, Bad Behavior. It all started with this tweet that had screenshots from a TikTok with the username cropped, with no title and no author listed in the tweet. This was sent to me many times, and I was super annoyed because once again, like many of these journeys begin, on Twitter, no one wants to say what it is, but I found it. The screenshot is actually from the author's TikTok page, and I recognize the author because this is the same person who wrote the Shrek fanfiction that got published. By the way, happy 20th anniversary to Shrek 2. I'm about to go to the theater for the re-release. So I read Bad Behavior, and it's not a relationship between a woman and a bee. It's a relationship between a woman and a bee alien shifter. Our main characters are Janessa, not Vanessa, Janessa, the human woman, and not Barry, but Barrix, the alien from another planet. Barracks comes from a race of sort of like dying, borderline extinct aliens, and so their solution is to go around to various planets with compatible life forms and procreate that way, while simultaneously using their honey-like substances to heal any dying plants or life on these various planets. Now, it appears that their typical method with life forms that they view as being more primitive and underdeveloped is to pollinate any compatible females by crawling into them in their bee form without the female's knowledge, right? Pollinating and then taking the spawn elsewhere. And so that's their plan when they visit the blue planet, when they visit Earth, because they're under the assumption, under the understanding somehow through much research that this is an underdeveloped primitive planet without any sort of developed civilizations. Barracks has literally been bred and born for this role, right? So imagine his surprise when there are buildings and cars when he drops down on Earth, and also when he picks up on the particularly attractive and strong scent of Janessa, who is with her really shitty boyfriend, not Ken, Kent. I have a laundry list of issues regarding a sort of white savior complex that goes on with this bee alien colony, as well as many consent issues. Luckily though, at the very least, the unconsensual breeding aspect of this colony's plan in the universe is called out multiple times by Janessa, who enters his relationship with this bee man who is obsessed with her. Hey, the book's 151 pages, and you can say whatever you want about this author in this book, but you can't say that she's not creative. And I won't lie to you, there are some genuinely very funny moments in this story. Not all of it was funny though. I did get stressed out often. There's a particular section in the story where Janessa's been kidnapped by evil bee aliens who are trying to disrupt or take over Barracks' mission on Earth because they're jealous of him and they hate him and they think they can do a better job than him. So Janessa's been kidnapped, and in the midst of Barracks and Janessa attempting to escape, right, this is time sensitive. I hate this. I hate this so much, and I swear to God, I only ever read it in the super weird, out of left field alien romances. If things are time sensitive, and there is a serious, deadly threat, right? Why are we taking the time to get freaky? This is so annoying. Time and place. At that point, I hope things don't work out for you. How dare you be so irresponsible? This is so reckless. This should not be anywhere near even your top 10 priorities in this moment. You have just been threatened with being bred against your will. What are we doing? Anyways, to say this was quite the journey that I took across the past 2 days is the understatement of the century. But something that I will always respect about this book, the author made sure to include the line, "Do you like jazz?" And I'm sorry, that was kind of everything. Like, if you're gonna do the B-movie fan fiction, you have to do it correctly. And sorry, like, this was done correctly.
Okay, yes! I just finished reading the Marshmallow Man thing. What a fascinating 21 pages of work. And a great dedication. We love supportive spouses in this household. Mating with Mallows is a super short Easter time novella about a young woman who hates sugar. She hates candy. She especially hates Easter candy because, and this is the only lore we get on anyone in this book, many years ago as a small child, she was mid-bite of marshmallows on Easter Day when she heard her mother screaming in the other room at the news that her father had just abandoned them. And as a result of the trauma from that incident, sugar has yet to ever taste the same. So she avoids sugar like the plague, and she gets teased about it because no one knows the real reason behind her aversion to it. We open up on the character being encouraged to try putting little marshmallows in the microwave because it makes them taste better. She puts it in the back of her mind. She's not taking it seriously. She's thinking back on her years of suffering at the hands of her father not being around. But then she gets curious. It's late at night. She goes to the store. She's minding her business. She sees the little marshmallow bunnies on the shelf. She grabs them, takes them home, puts 2 in the microwave. The microwave
explodes. There are marshmallow men in the kitchen. Here's where the story starts to lose me. There's no hi, hello, my name is. These men are on her and she's into it. And I say that this book loses me because no lore, no world building, no explanation of any kind, regardless of how silly it may be. Why did the microwave bring these men to life? Because they clearly aren't doing that with other marshmallow bunnies. We just saw a coworker eating them a second ago. Is her microwave special? These marshmallow men, so they've been watching her for years and they had a crush on her and were waiting for her to grab them off the shelf. Are all of the marshmallows sentient? Are they trapped in these voiceless marshmallow bodies waiting to be microwaved? Do they choose who they become like men for in the case of them being microwaved? Are there women? What are their names? Because our main character, what is her name? Cece. Cece doesn't know their name. She just refers to them as pink and blue because that's what they are. The pink bunny and the blue bunny. Also, circling back to that comment that one of them made about how they've been waiting for her to take them off the shelf for years, plural. Y'all don't have expiration dates? For how long? Your grocery store isn't like throwing out old candy from years prior? Is that normal? I've never worked in a grocery store. These marshmallow men don't have an opinion on anything. What does life look like post this night? I don't care if none of this was serious. I want answers. So a few weeks ago, I was summoned with a new Cookie Shifter book, totally frosted. But here's the thing, when I looked up the book, not only did I need to buy it, which I did, but I saw that it's book 8 out of 9 in a Shifter speed dating series. And this is also not the only food-related Shifter book. But we really do need to talk about this series because every single book was 1 star and I kept going anyways. With my biggest motivation going through the entire series being trying to understand this one piece of world building that never gets explained. So let's go through my notes. The basic rundown for this world in general is that this is a contemporary setting where there are shifters living amongst humans in secret. There's also a shifter council and shifter laws put in place that are enforced by this council. Do we know how far the reach of this council goes? No. I don't know if this is international law. I don't know if this varies state by state. Who's to really say? But the council enforces mainly this one particular shifter law that says humans and shifters cannot mate. Why was this law put in place? That was my question. The question that drove me through this entire series that we really don't get a clear answer on. Because it can't be for any sort of biological issues. It is established in nearly every single book in this series that humans and shifters are biologically compatible. They can reproduce. It is also established in 2 and 3 books that the shifter genes are dominant. So no matter what, if a human and a shifter get together, they will produce shifter children every time. So it's not even like they can come from a place of like concern of like, oh, this will dwindle the shifter population. No, literally no. It also can't have much to do with the mate bond because there are mate bonds that are being established and created between shifters and humans, which does lead us to a really weird recurring conflict in like every single one of these books where it seems like no shifter in the shifter community at large believes that mate bonds are a real thing despite us seeing it everywhere. Everyone and their mother has a mate bond. But every time we meet a shifter, these guys, they're like, that's just a fairy tale. And literally, no, it's not. I am convinced that the Shifter Council is spreading anti-mate propaganda into the shifter community. One piece of information that does lead us to an explanation is some sort of reference to a law saying that one of these shifters broke the law having to do with dishonoring shifter heritage. Which leads me to believe that the only reason why shifters and humans are not allowed legally by the council to date or mate or whatever is anti-human racism. And that's literally it. That's it. And that's really all the background info you need to know about this series going in. Because the core conflict of every single one of these books is these couples fighting for their right to be in love in spite of the laws put in place, in spite of this shifter council. But we're also watching the laws be changed and challenged by certain characters in this series. Which leads us into book number 1, the intro to it all, totally spooked the shifter romance between a fruit bat and a human woman, which is the other thing.
all 9 of these books are being told from the man's perspective. These are not dual POV. We are only reading from his brain. We are not reading from these women's brains at all. And it sucks. It sucks so bad. I hate it so much. I don't like these men at all. Every single one of them is like an alpha male type, even though some of them are literally, what do you mean? What do you mean? You are a goose. I'm getting ahead of myself. Book number 1 is about a fruit bat, right? He's heard things and he's interested in this secret hush-hush shifter speed dating service between shifters and humans, where the shifters go in blindfolded and they have to have a conversation with the human women who are not blindfolded, and then you have to see if you have the mate bond. And it's like this whole thing, and it gets like shut down, and there's melodrama, but it does not get shut down before our main character meets his mate. The only reason why this first couple is even all that relevant is to establish who the Shifter Council is, what they do to enforce their laws, and the fact that these two, once become a couple, decide to create their own shifter speed dating service after the first one gets shut down. And so their new shifter speed dating service is the main setting for the rest of the books. Book 2, Totally Basted, is about a turkey shifter who is attending one of the early new events of this new shifter speed dating service, meets the human woman, gets thrown by the council, blah. Totally Roasted is about a barnacle goose in particular, because yes, it did get that specific, who is a former enforcer for the Shifter Council that has been blackmailed into doing like one last job to go undercover into the Shifter speed dating service in order to shut it down. But then he meets his mate there, and now he's like torn because he's like, no. Side note, when he meets his human mate, she literally hates him for no reason. Like she's like, oh my gosh, another alpha male who thinks he's God's gift to women. And I reread the prior pages like 3 times trying to understand where she came to that conclusion. And I'm convinced the author just like had an interaction that she forgot to include before that. But also like all of these men are douchey in their own special ways. There's a conflict. It's here that we learn that the council is really like not above violence or kidnapping or threatening to murder people in the name of like keeping these laws in place. Why they care so much, again, don't know. We start to see the law get challenged here though by the main character in Totally Renewed, who is a phoenix. He hates the council, has major beef with the council that goes back years. So it's like his life's mission to derail the council and like change the shifter laws. It's at this point I really do feel the need to point out that like all of the women in these stories are really just there. They're just there. Number 5, Totally Bumbled, was a surprise. He is a Violet Carpenter bee. His name is Buzz. He lives a dangerous life, blah, blah, blah. I will give this one bonus points, though, for the disability rep. The woman in this is hard of hearing and wears hearing aids. That was nice to see. Right? I didn't pay attention to the cover of number 6, Totally Lucky, and fully prepared for, like, a leprechaun situation. Was very disappointed to see that it was not that. Though this was sort of like a shifter swap. Our main character is a human man non-shifter. His love interest is a manticore woman. She's betrothed to another manticore. It's like a whole thing. She's telling him that her parents will kill him. But with him in particular, despite being like sort of like an alpha male type and being the main character and having to be the hero that saves everything, he is also just kind of there with a very tragic backstory that we get in a single paragraph of dialogue that is jam-packed. They exist, there's conflict, they fall in love. We move on to number 7, Totally Sparked, which is between a platypus electrician who is coming to work on some like electrical problems at the shifter speed dating event where he meets his human mate woman. The main conflict for that, again, is just anti-human racism, anti-human discrimination. A death threat is made against anyone inside of the establishment participating in the evil shifter speed dating service. He's met his mate. He's personally involved now. Can't even remember how that one ends. This is the thing, before I get into the last 2, which are like the food shifter related things, I'm so annoyed by this whole series because I can see where the author is attempting humor and I just don't find it funny. And where everything else is, it's just boring. There's also just a very blatant, very noticeable, very obvious lack of effort in the construction of these stories that I personally find offensive. Moving on to number 8, Totally Frosted, the story of a bear shifter who was cursed by an evil witch many years ago for reasons that still are not explained, to turn into a gingerbread man every time he sneezes. His love interest is a human bakery owner. And this is where I get extra annoyed by the lack of world building. Not only is this guy cursed by a witch, but the next guy, number 9, Totally Dusted, who is cursed to turn into a donut, they're cursed by witches, but they don't have full explanations on why the witches did that. In the Cookie Man's case, it's mentioned that like a few 100 years ago, he was arranged to be mated to a woman from a neighboring village. And it's explicitly said that resulted in his village being burned down and a local witch blaming him for all of her loved ones dying. And so she put this curse on him. We don't know why that first attempt at mating resulted in the village being burned down. We don't know why she blames him. That's so annoying. But not as annoying as the lack of explanation in number 9, Totally Dusted. Our main character in that one is an Arctic fox who was cursed by a witch for literally no reason. He doesn't even know what events led up to it. He describes it as minding his own business, walking down the street, was cursed by a witch. He was just there, and he was cursed to turn into a donut every time he feels any sort of physical contact with a woman. This also is the only book in the series that involves 2 shifters falling in love. There's no human shifter situation, period. His love interest is an Arctic hare. I would like to argue that this is thinly veiled Zootopia fanfiction. And I'm just over it. I'm over it. I don't know if it's the same witch. I don't know if they're 2 different witches. I would like background on the witchcraft of this world, how it further functions in this whole setting. I'm really confused.
I'm trying to incorporate Little Grapey into my videos more because she was so well received the last time, and she is simply a who and a half. But now it's time to discuss a sentient object romance involving a human woman and the demon-possessed, crocheted candy corn hooker. Don't look at me like that. I'm not joking. Corny is book 1 in the Yarn and Monster series. We begin with a friend group of 4 women who are all conveniently and very curiously named after plants. Our main character for this book, because each book in the series follows a different woman in this group, is Clover. Clover and her friends are fed up with most things, but mainly their love lives, or lack thereof. And while they were out and about, the ladies found a magical book of spells. Some of them took it seriously, some of them did not. Either way, all 4 women participated in a love spell of sorts. Here's what went wrong though. The spell was actually them selling their souls to Satan, literally, and I still don't fully understand how that happened. What a mix-up. That is the oopsie-daisy to end all oopsie-daisies. But whatever, they accidentally make a deal with the devil and promise their soul to him within a year's time if they can't find their soulmate. Now, as a kindness, the devil does send them demons to help them on their journey to finding their soulmate, but they needed to provide vessels for these demons before the demons can interact with them. Clover is a fiber artist. She's really well known in online spaces of doing crocheted and knitted plushies, but in a funny way. She's very silly. One of her more recent creations is of a candy corn lady with boobs, but she's a hooker. And she slays and she's really fun to have. Her demon goes into that, and her demon goes by the name Candy. I believe this is the only queer relationship dynamic that goes on in the series, but what a powerful statement to open up the entire 4-book series with a bicon. But I'm also not gonna lie to you, I've read 3 out of the 4 books that are published so far. Clover and Candy's dynamic has to be my least favorite, and I think because they spend so much time bickering. These are polar opposites. These are 2 women that are clashing at all times. Right? She agrees. They seem to be in very different headspaces during this entire journey. And the ratio to bickering and bantering to actual, intimate romantic moments felt very, unbalanced. But the 2 do fall in love. What's really interesting about it, though, is that Candy doesn't really reach her original true demon state until the very end. Because in order for these demons, because spoiler alert, this entire series is going to be comprised of, the women falling in love with these demons that are sent to help them find their soulmates on accident. The thing about these demons is that they can't show their true form until the job is completed. So until these women find their soulmates, until these women realize and accept and acknowledge that they are in love with the demons. So the majority of the intimate moments between these characters and their demons are spent in crocheted plush form. And although the relationship dynamic between these two characters in book 1 isn't my favorite, I do think it is objectively the funniest book out of the series so far, simply because Candy's candy corn form has an ass that won't quit, and Clover thinks about it often. And I cannot bring myself to hate such brilliance. I read the sentient object romance between a human historian human and a toy of a certain kind. I don't think I can show the book cover of this uncensored. It's not even like a detailed image, but I feel like it's detailed enough to get flagged. I'm not risking it. Stiff by Thea Mason. Stiff follows two main characters. Felicity, who is a historian that is currently doing research for a book exploring the history of toys of a certain nature, and Richard, who is a 14th century lord who was notorious, a villain, notorious for only prioritizing his pleasure during intimate moments with women. He was so infamously known for this that a witch found out, decided to investigate matters herself, saw that the rumors were true, cursed him to be an object that can only fulfill other people's pleasure. Now, in this sentient toy state, he can experience some enjoyment, but not to a satisfactory end, and he's just been like that for a few hundred years. The only way to break his curse and bring him back to a human form is if someone performs an act with the part of their body that makes words on him in his toy state. But he can't communicate with anyone. No one knows that he's alive. Which brings us to Felicity doing research. She's taken home a few ancient toys for research purposes, including Richard, which is throwing me off. Why he's not being kept in a museum for safety reasons is beyond me. But I don't know, maybe it's standard practice for historians to just like take their work home. Felicity's like in a slump of sorts. She's in a writing slump. She's also in a romantic physical type of slump. She can't really get into the right headspace to use these toys. So she opts to read a steamy romance novel, and in the romance novel something's happening and she chooses to reenact it with one of the toys on hand, and so she grabs Richard. Now, I understand that Felicity has said outright explicitly that she has cleaned Richard thoroughly. However, never in a bajillion trillion gazillion years will you ever find me using anything of that nature that is secondhand. Especially not when it's centuries old. Centuries and centuries of being secondhand. This is probably 100th hand at this point. This could be spotless. It could be germ-free. That's still ew. Although I understand that it was a necessary plot point in order for us to move forward. She performs the act. All of a sudden, a man! Richard just like manifests. Felicity is startled, obvi, and chaos ensues. Richard has no clothes on, and he does not wear clothes for like a while. The majority of his time in this story is spent completely buck naked. The witch appears. The curse has been broken, but not in the correct way. She still doesn't believe that Richard has learned his lesson about prioritizing other people's, his partner's, comfort and pleasure and enjoyment during the act. Felicity steps in a little bit and thinks that the witch is being very extreme in her approaches to teaching a lesson. And so Felicity, Richard, and the witch form an agreement where Richard and Felicity have to like date, kind of. And Richard has to like engage in this relationship and prove that he can prioritize another person and prioritize another person's like pleasure. If they can prove that to the witch within like a general semi-unspecified time period, then he can continue to live life as a human man. So Richard and Felicity get crackin'. And here's my thing. This book actually isn't bad. I enjoyed myself. I thought this was like really funny. Richard and Felicity are really funny. They have such good banter and such good humor with one another at all times. Sort of falls into the category of fake dating, and they do both reach that point of, oh no, I have feelings for this person. But it's so, they manage to laugh with each other often, and they manage to enjoy the level of absurdity that is maintained within their relationship through even their most intimate moments. And I don't know, I really enjoyed them together. They were really fun to read about, and I really enjoyed this relationship. Dare I say couple goals? It's a book that is surprisingly very genuine in nature, and I learned a lot of new terminology for certain body parts. I gave this book 3 out of 5. Let's discuss the sentient object romance between a human woman and her demon-possessed teddy bear. That's also 5 feet tall, which only made me picture that really depressed teddy bear from that one episode of Supernatural with the wishing well. And I know you know what I'm talking about. I know my audience.
It is a terrible world. Why am I here?
Snuggle is book 2 in the Yarn and Monster series about a group of 4 women who experience a romantic drought of sorts and cast a spell to find lovers, but accidentally make a deal with the devil where if they can't find their soulmate in a year's time, their soul goes to the devil, and so the devil sends them demons to help them on their journeys, but spoiler alert, all of the women end up falling in love with their demons instead, though the demons have to inhabit a vessel of the women's choosing, which all just so happen to be crocheted plushies that are made by the main character in book 1. This book's focus is Jasmine and her demon Finarax, aka Finn, although he doesn't like to be called Finn, and Jasmine calls him Finn anyways. We respect foreign names in this household. Jasmine is a newly single mother. She used to be married to this douche, and now has to co-parent with him now that they're divorced. He has this new girlfriend. He wants to take their kids on these crazy vacations whenever he feels like it. He's very inconsiderate. He's very annoying. And Jasmine hasn't really had the time or the desire to really pursue a new relationship outside of the one she had with him. But then she ends up accidentally selling her soul to it's like a whole bit. Her ex suddenly wants to take their kids on a vacation with him and his girlfriend, and so Jasmine is alone in her house for a little while, which is when Finarax finally decides to animate in his teddy bear form and start making that game plan with Jasmine about getting her out in the dating field. Only 3 out of the 4 books in this series have been published. The 4th one comes out at the end of this month. But out of the 3 that I've read so far, Finarax has to be my favorite love interest. He's very considerate. He just, wants to take care of Jasmine. They also have a really interesting dynamic of, grumpy caretaker and grumpy taken care of. And I don't know, I enjoy them together. The intimate moments between them are genuinely insane, and I couldn't stop picturing the depressed teddy bear from Supernatural and that talking teddy bear from the guy who made Family Guy. Is it Ted? Is his name Ted?
Yes.
Demon magic gets involved in a way that I really can't explain. Oh my god. We're like that one painting. I think I ended up giving this book 2.5 or 3 out of 5 stars. I genuinely, there's something very sweet and very tender about this couple. There's something very domestic about this this really angry 5-foot-tall teddy bear. A short king, honestly. And every new installment to the series genuinely has me more and more excited for the 4th and final installation for it. Because it really is a one-of-a-kind serise. I read The Sentient Object Romance about a gay lamp, and then forgot to talk about it alongside some other really weird ones, because, after I read them, I did some traveling, and then I didn't want to, think about these books while I was with my family. And I'm getting restless, quarantining in my bedroom. I have COVID, by the way. I'm getting restless, quarantining in my bedroom, and need someone to talk to and ramble at. And I remembered that there are a lot of books that I forgot to make reviews about. Light Me Up is about a lamp. And his, college boy owner. To be specific, he's a desk lamp. And for this, you may be wondering, Grapey, is this lamp alive because it's also a son of Zeus? To that I say, no, you idiot. This lamp isn't the son of anybody. It was a regular degular lamp, and then a lightning bolt from the god Thor got into his electrical outlet while he was plugged in, and it gave him life, and now he's alive. Duh. Light Me Up is really interesting because it leaned surprisingly heavily into, the drama and, the highs and lows
of high school football. No, the highs and lows of like a messy college relationship, or whatever it is you're calling this, between this like young man and his lamp. Honestly, the main focus of this book does have to do with like the intimate moments between these two individuals and how that physical intimacy is explored and depicted was a bit of a shock. But no, seriously, like the electrical cord gets used in a way that honestly just seems like painful and not fun. I'm gonna be honest, I think my biggest critique for this is that I would have liked more time spent after these two had like healed from their wounds, because there is like there's like a major conflict between these two, and I would have liked to see some more time with them after they've adjusted from the major conflict being solved. Like post-resolution, I would have liked to see that time together, especially because a lot happens in that post-resolution. Thor does make an appearance like in person, and that is the extent of my spoiler for that particular moment. I'm trying to think. I gave this book somewhere between like a 2, maybe a 3 out of 5 star. I did not give this 3 out of 5 stars. Did I give this 3 out of 5 stars? I think I gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars. Good, not great, honestly kind of scary at some points. Undeniably original. Has resulted in me staring suspiciously at my desk lamp ever since. I would like to have a discussion about Pushin' Cushions, the story of a Republican vice president nominee, DJ Rance, who has forbidden secret relations with his couch, because there are layers to the damage done to my psyche. First things first, this content warning page provided in the book. There is a lot going on. Pushin' Cushions tells the story of Dennis J. Rance, who is under a lot of stress since recently being announced as the Republican vice president nominee, chosen by a man named Trent, who is an idiot and has a lot of fraud issues. Dennis just recently went through a divorce. He's very lonely and he's very overworked and needs an outlet of some kind, and when searches related to dolphins doesn't do the trick, he turns to Old Reliable, the couch. The thing about this couch, as Dennis is having his interaction with it, side note, points deducted actually for virgin seam being a line that is in this. During his interaction, he's so invested in it, he's so invested in the act, that he has this moment where he's like, oh, I can almost hear the couch responding now. He creates a dialogue fantasy in his head. The thing is, though, it's not in his head. He thinks it's in his head. The couch is speaking to him, the couch is alive. The couch is alive, and it has been this whole time. Because for why? A curse. That we don't have very many details on, so that's the second round of points deducted. I'm a simple woman. I see weird book. I need lore. However, this does appear to potentially be influenced by a different story from a while ago that I talked about on here, but a different sentient couch erotic story. Le Sofa. Now, this book was pretty unsettling from the jump. In concept alone, ooky spooky, but this does genuinely take a turn the closer to the end that you get. And honestly, I don't have it in me to spoil it for you, because okay, there is a disclaimer before the book starts that questions whether or not this book can qualify as a romance due to its technical potential from a certain perspective. Happy ending question mark? Because it is like a bad ending. Because at the end of the day, this guy, Dennis, DJ Rance, he's a bad person. And so it's not like we want him to have a happily ever after. And he doesn't. But then he doesn't hate it. But also he does. But there is something that he likes. But this is not ideal. But I think what honestly makes this book so silly and so fun, despite the nightmare that it will cause for the rest of my life, is that this isn't even the first piece of sentient object erotic fiction that I've read that pokes fun at politicians, like right-wing politicians. I think free will is like really scary, kind of silly. Bonus points for the couch being non-binary. But all in all, with Pushin' Cushions, you know from the content warning page alone, before the story even begins, that this is such a deeply unserious project made for funsies in like maybe 2 hours. And so I also simply cannot help but respect it
deeply. It's on Kindle Unlimited. It is only like 50 pages. It is a one-of-a-kind unique experience. I just finished watching this movie about 5 minutes ago. Objectively, one of the funniest holiday movies I've seen in probably years. And also, surprisingly, a lot more heartwarming than I was expecting it to be. And here's the thing, this is so Hallmark quality, kind of. And I knew that from the trailer. That's part of what made me so excited. But when you go into it expecting a basic surface level Hallmark movie, it kind of surpasses expectations. I mean, it's literally the story of Frosty the Snowman, but if everyone was really horny for Frosty. And that's really it, because this man Jack is also a jolly happy soul. In the world of this small town, there is a snowman making competition. Or snow sculpture, I guess. And in a sea of regular, degular, standard-looking snowmen and women, and something that's nearby that looks like a frog alligator thing, some horny freak made this guy buck naked until Kathy comes along and gives him this very special scarf. Things to know about Kathy, she was married for a while and she was madly in love with her husband until he unfortunately died of cancer. Her husband was a handyman, and since he died, parts of the house keep falling apart and disintegrating, and she doesn't know how to fix it because that was what her husband did. And she keeps forgetting to call handymen to come and fix it for her, when really we as the audience know that it's because that job was reserved for her husband and she refuses to let it go. Until she accidentally brings Jack to life, who wakes up to life by himself. Kathy she went home, and this man is just running around in nothing but this scarf. He accidentally breaks into a store and finds clothing, and the entire time, because he's totally latched onto Kathy, the entire time Kathy is like so in denial that he's actually a snowman. She's convinced that he's just like not okay mentally, which like fair. But this entire movie, there's a lot of moving parts happening. Number one, the sheriff. What a tyrant. He is determined to find the mysterious streaker that broke into his store, and Kathy's whole job is to make sure that he's not found out. But then Jack is also making a place for himself in this town. He genuinely enjoys helping people. He's a fast learner. He keeps watching all of these like baking and cooking shows and also these home repair shows. He begins to fill this very particular void in Kathy's life in a way that makes her very nervous. He's also not fully human. Now, he does unfortunately fall into like the born sexy yesterday trope, which bothers me. I hate that trope. He doesn't know what anything is, and it's very frustrating. He is a giant baby for like a good 20 to 30 minutes of the movie. But again, he's not fully human. He is still, his body temperature is like at a frozen temperature. He needs to remain cold at all times or else he starts to melt despite being flesh, which is actually disgusting. It registers on screen as him just being like really, really sweaty, but the idea of like melting flesh, ew. So Kathy and him also need to make sure that he is constantly cold, despite having to wear clothing and be out in public all the time. And also, the main thing, these two are falling in love. He's all in, he's all for it. Kathy is the one that's hesitating for obvious and very valid reasons. And part of where this movie shines is that it's genuinely very funny sometimes. And I'm not talking about the running gag where like everyone in this town collectively is like madly in love with Jack. They think he is the hottest, sexiest piece of ass they've ever seen in their entire existence. Like the old women in this town specifically drool after this man to an absurd and confusing degree. But no, it's in this guy's friendship with the sheriff deputy and in a few pieces of dialogue that this becomes a laugh out loud comedy. There's an entire section of the film dedicated to Jack assisting with putting together and decorating and planning a winter dance at the local high school. And Jack gets along with everyone. Everyone loves him, especially these kids. So when he's a chaperone at the dance, one of the kids comes up to him and asks him if he brought a date. And Jack is like, oh yeah. And then the kid is like, oh my gosh, which one is she? And Jack goes, over there, the adult, which made me laugh really hard to potentially an embarrassing degree because she was the only adult woman in that room. Now, is the chemistry between Jack and Kathy good or believable or strong in any capacity? No. The actor playing Jack is like okay, but he keeps doing this thing with his face where his eyebrows are constantly raised all of the time for every emotion. He is so tense in the entire forehead region of his face. You can see it in this photo. For approximately 20 seconds total in the entirety of this film's runtime, his facial muscles are completely relaxed, and it stresses me out. However, there is a particular scene and moment between Kathy and Jack that happens at the dance. I was moved. That was so lovely. I was emotional for like a split second. Like that really got me. That was true love right there. I don't care if they've only known each other for 2 weeks and she's still not even sure that if he's like actually a snowman or just delusional. That was real true love right there for that one scene. All in all, can I call this movie a disappointment? Absolutely not. This was exactly as advertised. Nay, better than what was advertised. And it's just so silly. I don't care if we're skipping Thanksgiving. This has put me in the Christmas spirit. In Glazed by the Gay Living Donuts, interacting with these living sentient donuts in any sort of explicit manner is an inherently radical and dangerous act. Not just because the act itself is illegal, but also because sentient donuts are banned from being in the US, despite being US born. So these living donuts live and exist in secret in the United States. So they do all of their partying and their working and their living at these super unknown underground hidden nightclubs. And it's an open secret. Apparently in this world, sentient donuts that are born, I guess, naturally lean more heavily towards a hedonistic, sexually explicit lifestyle, and were banned in 2016 specifically, which is a subtle detail that I think is important to note. And yet despite this living donut ban and how outrageously illegal interacting and engaging with them is, communities of these living donuts thrive nonetheless. And I think this story of a really bizarre pastry sex club is actually a fascinating story of resilience. Well, the story of Glazed by the Gay Living Donuts is a story of resilience, and a fascinating one at that. Now, here's the thing, this story is only like, 30 pages? So we don't get a lot of world building or lore, but we do know that once the presence and existence of these sentient donuts became outlawed and banned in the US, we know that there were many protests saying that it's unconstitutional and against their human rights. But because donuts aren't human, they don't have human rights to violate. And many moved over to Europe. But here in the US, we have these secret clubs, these secret nightclubs with these sentient pastries. And they still party hard, and they still go on tours, and they still have a well-established community, because also in the world of these outlawed, sexually promiscuous sentient donuts that just live in this world, we know that there are like secret communities of allies. Our main character goes into a shop, like a pastry shop, where he's pretty sure there's a connection to one of these donut nightclubs, and he's talking to like the guy at the register or whatever. And there's this whole section where the guy's like offering like different pastry types and like different types of donuts, and then our main character's like, that all sounds nice, but do you have anything a little gayer? And the cashier freezes and is like, I don't know what you're talking about, denying any connection to the gay sentient donuts. But then our main character is like, don't play dumb with me. I saw a donut symbol on the door. I know you're connected to them. There's a whole system. There's a whole system with symbols to designate safe spaces for these donuts and for the lovers of these donuts. And that is so radical. That is so resilient, because like, you don't just know to do that. You don't just know to have a designated symbol. Like, someone had to organize and come up with that. These donuts need to be housed by non-donut supporters in order to like maintain their safety, to remain protection. The very nature of these nightclubs operate solely because of community and allyship. And that is very cool. That is very cool. Someone sent me this book recommendation while also apologizing, while also wishing me a happy Thanksgiving. Basted is the story of a woman's encounter with 3 sentient turkey basters that are also brothers. Our main character walks in on her shitty boyfriend cheating on her in the middle of his restaurant. Because it is Thanksgiving time, she's dressed as a sexy turkey. The boyfriend doesn't even know that he's been caught. He's so caught up in the moment and then goes home. Stunned in her silence and also looking over the delicious food he had prepared for like a party, she's thinking about a lot of things. She's thinking about her now end of a relationship, is thinking about her heartbreak. Above all, she's thinking about how large she feels in her body compared to how small the body is of the woman that he's cheating on her with. I know from a few offhand comments that this ex-boyfriend was really controlling and judgmental about her gaining weight, about her overeating. And this has severely damaged her relationship with her body and body image. She went on a really weird, extreme cabbage diet to keep the weight down in order to make herself look good for this awful man. Now she's reached a breaking point. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of this actually reminds me of the book Piglet, which is about a woman entering this like binging eating disorder after a betrayal from her fiance. And the similar vibes really do continue because she goes a little crazy, and there's so much emphasis on stuffing herself. Something about one of the turkey basters in particular calls to her, and it isn't until after she starts getting freaky with it that she starts to hear a voice from the baster communicating with her. Now there are 3 basters involved, but one of them is like the main baster. He calls himself Master Baster. Despite the book only being 69 pages, this felt like a day. This felt like an entire day. I felt like I was here forever. The descriptions of this woman's time with these basters is so bizarre and also so weirdly grotesque. I think if I ever have to read the word juices ever again, I may vomit. But I'm also just like, I'm trying so hard to get a visual on what these basters are, because this isn't just a sentient baster romance, this is a baster monster romance. These basters have these shadowy forms and these mysterious tendrils, and they tell her that the more pleasure they gain from her, the more solid their form is. Like their physical existence is dependent on this one very specific interaction that they're having with this one woman. Don't even get me started on the conversation that is happening halfway through about babies and making babies and how she is the perfect woman to carry their babies. Never mind the ick that I have about siblings sharing a partner. Ew. There's a lot to say about Basted, most of it unsettling, most of it covered in juices. And all in all, I'll never look at a turkey baster the same. I am scarred for life. There's a really extensive sentient object romance series called the Kyleverse, and it covers a range of objects that are made magically sentient. A rake, a really uncomfortable Furby, a birthday present, a whole bunch of stuff. The reason why it's called the Kyleverse specifically is because every single installment involves a recurring side character named Kyle. Kyle is never the main character, but he is always significant to the plot. You're always waiting for the mention and the inclusion of Kyle, this random guy down for anything. And here's the thing, the stories do get pretty formulaic. It's always this scenario of like a human person who is attracted for some reason to this sentient object thing, who's scared of their attraction to it, because that's not normal. But they still want to explore the relationship with this talking sentient thing anyways. And typically the catalyst to make them more comfortable in this new relationship is inviting Kyle over to be involved more often than not, if you catch my drift. When I say Kyle is down for anything, Kyle is down for anything, and everybody knows that he's down for anything. It's a whole thing. It is so, oh my god, Kyle. But make no mistake, although the books are pretty formulaic, that does not mean that all Kyleverse installments are built the same. My absolute favorite in the series is Nimbus, the one about the cloud. I think that has to be the most like emotional, angsty installment yet. Although I haven't read the like new one that's coming out in a couple days. What is it, Wacky? It looks like one of those car sale like inflatable thingies. We'll see what goes on with that thing. But Nimbus was so good. Like Nimbus was genuinely, by Kyleverse standards, so good. And it was a really refreshing twist in the Kyleverse series, because it I think of all the books, that one felt like the author was really taking it kind of seriously the most. I mean, don't get me wrong, all of the books are objectively silly. The Furby one is haunting and scary and unsettling. I don't like that one. That one freaked me out, and it still freaks me out. I don't like it. But Nimbus was good. And also, you know what? So was the Rubik's Cube one. What I do also appreciate about the Kyleverse is that it started off with sort of like haphazardly including magic in like creating these scenarios where like people are being transformed into sentient objects, or things just are sentient because of reasons. And instead of going too long without really explaining why all these magical things keep happening in the same town that Kyle inhabits, the author just like started incorporating various forms of like magical lore. Like in some cases, these are creatures like from a magical realm that shapeshift and transform. Sometimes there are people that are transformed from like
curses and witches and deals with like the devil, and then sometimes it's not like properly explained, but it's consistent in its lack of consistency. Like it's never really the same reason twice, but everything gets more and more interconnected the more it develops, the more we carry on with the Kyle verse, and it like connected in a way that extends beyond Kyle. Like we, in some of the later installments, we start to see some of the characters from like the earlier books pop up and like meet up for reasons, and original characters sort of become background characters to the new stories in this increasingly detailed extended universe. You can say whatever you want about sentient object romance authors, because yes, they're all deeply unserious, but when you find one that's really serious about their commitment to being unserious, that's golden. That's precious to me. Hey, what the fuck? I read it and kind of scary actually. There's murder in this, and like not even like the funny kind. So it's 1907 and our main character is the baker's wife. She actually doesn't have a name until way later, and it's like significant. It is intentional that she has completely lost her identity to her horrible, violent, abusive husband, and she has absolutely had it. She has no chance for escape. She has nowhere to go, but she's so fed up, and so she constructs a gingerbread man. She includes a certain, oh my god, what was that one lady from freaking 10 Things I Hate? Engorged member. He is well endowed. And the gingerbread man comes to life and becomes her secret lover while her husband is away. But I think what people should be prepared for is the whole altercation, is the big showdown where the gingerbread man has a major confrontation with the husband. It's scary, it's violent, it's also kind of devastating, and the way that it ends, I think there is going to be a sequel, because it's not a happy ending. I'm left with the feeling of fear and not at all the Christmas spirit. But boy oh boy is that gingerbread man freak! He keeps speaking in rhyme, but not entirely in rhyme. No, he's nothing like the gingerbread man from that other book, Ravaged by the Gingerbread Man, who is a gingerbread man that also comes to life, but only speaks in rhyme. This gingerbread man speaks in rhyme sometimes. All in all, final thoughts, ooky spooky, and so, so sad. I just read a published piece of erotic horror Grinch fanfiction called Mean One, and it's about a green monster named the Grouch from Horrorville and his human lover / accomplice for his murder spree, Max, who is just like this young woman who is obsessed with him. But while the two are performing this killing spree in Horrorville, there's a recurring conflict with Max knowing that she will never be the only person, the only woman in the Grouch's heart, because May Martha still lives. May Martha, the Grouch's first love. Now a prostitute at the local brothel who is also the regular servicer for the head police chief, Gus, short for Gustafer. She wants out of her life. She's so miserable with Gus. This book truly is this never-ending spiral of intimate dark desires and bloody murder. Like truly, it's just getting horny and wanting vengeance, but it's literally the Grinch. I found this book on accident, believe it or not. Usually these types of things I get tagged in or I get sent, but I found this one. Well, not on I guess I was okay. So this is how I found it. I was logging the sentient Christmas tree romance that I had just read, and when I scrolled down to look at other books that were similar, like I always do, especially with like the weird books, I saw Mean One and I was like, oh, like the Grinch, and it was like, yes, like the Grinch. But I didn't know it was gonna be like this crazy, and then once I started I couldn't stop reading it because like, what are we doing? There's so much hatred and longing in the relationship dynamic between the Grouch and Max. He's so desperate to be loved, but he can only love May Martha. But then he also kind of loves / needs Max because she's the only one who's remained loyal to him, and also because she's like the only person down to get this wild, like how he gets wild. I think it's the weirdest Christmas related anything I've ever read on Christmas Eve, and I will be processing this indefinitely. Yes, I did read the story about the woman falling in love with 3 sentient Christmas trees, titled If He Wanted To, He Would. Many people tagged me, many people sent it my way, and it is as advertised. We open up on a young woman who has just found out that the guy she's been with for 3 years is not only cheating on her, but also like dumping her. The reasoning for breaking things off with her is also so bizarre, because the first thing he credits to the end of their relationship is the fact that in the 3 years they've been together, they have only seen each other on weekends, never a weekday, which I agree should have been a red flag of sorts, because what do you mean you've never in your life seen your boyfriend of 3 years on like a Tuesday? But whatever. The other reason is even weirder. He says that she's a holiday person. He credits her intense love for Christmas as one of the reasons why he can't be with her.
after being with her for 3 years. Heartbroken and devastated, she goes to her best friend, who has always hated this man. And it's very important to me that you know that this best friend curses like a 6th grader who has never cursed before. It's actually very annoying. I hate her so much. I hate when she speaks so much, but whatever, she's supportive, I guess. So in her heartbreak, and also to honor her love for the upcoming holiday season, because it's like the end of November, she decides to visit a Christmas tree farm early, and this is when we switch perspectives to the 3 sentient Christmas trees in the back of the Christmas tree lot: Bruce, Forrest, and Ash. Best friends from the 80s. They used to be humans, they were playboys, they were cursed as punishment for being playboys. They have been Christmas trees ever since. They have been Christmas trees for the past 40 years. The logistics of this curse are really interesting. So they can shift back into a temporary human form whenever they are physically around a woman they have the potential of truly falling in love with, which has never happened before in all of their 40 years of experiencing this Christmas tree curse. Until today, when our main character is just roaming around the Christmas trees, stumbles and falls into one of the trees. I can't remember which one she actually falls into directly. Maybe Bruce, but only because she has a connection with all 3 of the men, but she has a very special connection with Bruce that's like kind of its own thing. The physical experience of falling into one of these tree men transforms all 3 of them into a human state that is very temporary, and they immediately get freaky in the Christmas tree lot. Then when the 4 of them are complete, they very quickly tell her that they're running out of time before they transform back into a tree, even though they could have spent this time together explaining what's happening, but no. Everyone's priorities got all horny. They basically tell her we don't have time to explain, even though they did have time to explain. Buy all 3 of us as Christmas trees, take us home, and we'll explain better there. And because she thinks this is all an elaborate dream, she does. And so the rules of breaking the curse are that, like, for the next, 4 to 5 weeks, the 3 of them have to, date and seriously pursue and be legitimate gentlemen with this one woman. And if the love that they have formed is true, then on New Year's, the 3 trees need to be buried in magical sand, not to be touched or unburied, or even be able to transform back into a human state until the next December. So they have a month to fall in love, and then they have to wait a year to actually see if any of it worked, and if they can go back to being human permanently and live happily ever after. She does not have the ability to communicate, while they're in their sleep state. I don't even know what to call the tree state, because they do establish in the epilogue that they're able to communicate with each other in their cursed tree state, but they can't talk to her, I guess, and it's a whole thing. I personally would have liked to see more of a reaction from any of these men about any of the stuff that they missed in the past 40 years, any of the people that they lost in the past 40 years. Not much mourning going on for any family or friends they have outside of each other. Anyway, she dates all 3 of them and she falls in love with all 3 of them, I guess, but really, I don't think this love is believable. It's purely physical and then they call it love. I don't buy it. Granted, it was never that serious, but still. But I don't know, this was fine.